Hi, my name is Citysqwirl, and I'm going to read to you a short story today called SPUN Pink. I don't know how this is going to work out. It's my first time trying this, so we'll see if it works, and you let me know what you think. Here we go. SPUN Pink by Citysqwirl. Betty carefully carried the bulbous ice-coated bird feeder inside through the back kitchen door. She stomped her shiny vinyl red boots on the doormat, breathing heavily, her lips blue. "Whew," she said, "look what I found." Her sister Heather, older by 2 years, peered over her shoulder, then calmly lowered the heat under the bananas she was frying. Heather wiped her hands on a dish towel and turned. "It's the bird feeder," Heather said. "It's iced up." "So?" "Look what's in it, stupid," Betty said, exasperated. She shook her blonde hair in disbelief and held the bird feeder out to Heather in her pink-gloved hands. "A frozen bird. Look." The bird feeder, inside the ice, was shaped like a child's drawing of a house, with a plastic cubic blue base and a red sloped roof with eaves. There was a translucent chimney, up through which a misshapen funnel of ice protruded. Encased in the frozen funnel, above the chimney top, Heather could see the bird's head, a gray peppered sparrow, its beak slightly open. "Is it dead?" asked Heather matter-of-factly. "Of course it's dead. It's an ice cube." Heather quickly peered down the hallway, worried, checking for Agnes, their mother. Agnes was nowhere in sight. Heather could vaguely hear the whisper of television from her mother's room. "Are you crazy?" Heather hissed at Betty. "What?" Betty lowered the bird feeder, which dripped melting ice on the brown linoleum. "Mama wanted to give it a burial. I know she'll be sad, but it's important. It's the wonder of nature. She wouldn't want it just frozen out there in the yard." "Get it out of here," Heather said sharply, "before she sees." "What's your problem?" Betty asked. She put the bird feeder on the kitchen table and began to remove her gloves and puffy white down coat. "Scared?" "Don't be stupid." Heather picked up the bird feeder. "Hey," Betty said, "put it down." "I'm going to throw it outside," Heather said grimly. Betty blocked the kitchen door. "I found it," she said. "It's mine." "Move or you'll be sorry," said Heather. "Put it down," Betty countered. "You're no saint, Miss Goody-Goody. Put it down or I'll cut your hair when you're asleep, and you know I will. Tonight. Maybe tomorrow night." "You'll do what?" asked Agnes. Both girls turned and froze, staring at their mother. Agnes was standing in the hall entrance, wearing a flowered flannel nightgown and a green hairnet. Her eyes were raccoon-ringed with mascara. One hand was on one hip. "What's all the shouting about? Can't I even take a decent nap in this crazy place? I told both of you you've got to help me out if I'm going to stay here and survive. Betty, don't threaten your sister." "I found it. It's mine," Betty said sullenly. "What have you got there?" Agnes asked Heather, who was hiding the bird feeder behind her back. "Nothing, Mom," Heather said. "It's just something Betty found. I was just going to throw it out." "What is it?" Agnes took a step into the kitchen. She was wearing ratty, light blue ballet slippers. "What are those puddles on the floor?" "It's nothing," Heather said quickly. "Go back and get some rest. I'll clean up. You need your rest." Betty grabbed the bird feeder from behind Heather's back. "Give me that," said Heather. "Shut up. I found it," Betty said. She proudly held the bird feeder out to her mother. "It's a bird, frozen stiff." Agnes paled. She stared at the bird feeder, at the encased sparrow, and her mouth opened slowly, awkwardly, her chin shaking. She raised a hand and covered her mouth. Betty took a step backwards. She lowered the bird feeder. Heather jumped to Agnes's side, gripped her arm. "Mom, are you okay? I told her not to bring it in. I told her." "Don't touch me," Agnes wailed. Betty dropped the bird feeder. It fell to the linoleum with a heavy thunk, ice scattering. Betty pushed past her mother and sister and ran down the hall, whacking a framed flowery print off the wall with her shoulder. She slammed her bedroom door behind her. Heather stooped to pick up the bird feeder, but Agnes stopped her. "Don't touch it," Agnes whispered. "Just leave it alone. Alone." Agnes slowly sank to the ground, hunched, with her palms flat on the floor. "It could be any sparrow," she whispered, choked up. She shook her head. "It could be any poor little bird. It doesn't have to be—" Agnes started sobbing then, her shoulders huddling, shuddering like a cold toy poodle. Heather heard Betty turn up the radio in her bedroom, so loud the song was garbled, unrecognizable. Heather kneeled and gathered up Agnes in her arms. The smell of burning bananas filled the kitchen. Heather gently cradled her mother, staring up at the ceiling, praying for heavenly guidance as if she and Agnes were emotional models for a reversed modern Pietà. Later in the week, Betty was showing new touches in the house, the newly upholstered curtains on the den couch, the new clock on the dining room mantelpiece, the framed pretty photograph of herself next to the new clock, to Jeff after school. When they reached the living room, Betty disdainfully waved away her little sister Doris. "Don't pay any attention to her," Betty said. "She's gone crazed." Jeff stared frankly at Doris, who was busy at work with paper and scissors behind the living room coffee table. Jeff had been Betty's best friend, and often worst enemy, since childhood, and they had fooled around once, months ago, when they were both 14. Betty already had hefty breasts, with extremely pink nipples, which she had let Jeff touch, but not kiss. It had ended halfway through. As soon as Jeff took off his shirt, Betty told him he was skinny and gross. It had taken Jeff 6 months to forgive her, but he had missed her, and this was the first time he'd come over since she'd insulted him. Besides, maybe she would want to fool around again. Betty had dropped hints as subtle as lace handkerchiefs, and he'd been working out with weights in his basement. "What's she doing?" Jeff asked. "Cutting out flowers?" "I couldn't care less," Betty said. "Come on, my mother's at Pathmark with Heather." "Wait." Jeff walked over to the low coffee table and peered down at Doris's handiwork, sliced up white paper. Doris didn't stop snipping. "What are you making?" Jeff asked. "Paper people," said Doris, cutting a semicircle. "What for?" "Just because," Doris said. Jeff picked up a daisy chain of paper people. "They don't have any legs," he said. "No." "Why not?" Betty sighed. "Jeff," she called impatiently. "Come on, we've got to hurry. I told you she's totally crazed." "Why not?" Jeff asked again. "I just like them that way," Doris said. "I cut them off." She snipped the legs of a new chain of paper people. 1, 2, 1, 2, snip, snip. Betty sighed again loudly and stormed over to the coffee table. "Doris, you freak," she said. "Jeff, come on." Following Betty down the hallway to her bedroom, Jeff protested. "She just has a thing for making paper people, without legs. She's not that bad." "She just has a thing for cripples," Betty said.